So get this, something really big is happening right now with American fighter jets, and it's like watching a massive game of chess being played in the sky. According to reports that are coming in, F-22 and F-35 fighter jets are already flying toward the Middle East as part of what the Secretary of Defense called making their defensive position stronger in that region. It all started on June 16, 2025, when there was this sudden and massive deployment of U.S. Air Force aerial refueling aircraft. These are basically flying gas stations that help other planes refuel while they're in the air. After that happened, reports started spreading really quickly about American fighter jets being sent out, and we're talking specifically about F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning jets. The guy in charge of defense stuff, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, ordered the deployment of additional military capabilities to what they call the United States Central Command Area of Operations. He said that protecting U.S. forces is their top priority, and these deployments are meant to make their defensive posture in the region even stronger. The deployment orders were actually issued over the weekend, and right around the same time they released that statement. Here's where it gets really interesting. The first tanker planes with gold call signs, which are usually associated with something called coronet flights, started appearing on flight tracking websites. These are websites where people can watch planes flying around the world in real time, kind of like tracking a delivery truck, but for airplanes. U.S. fighter jets have been spotted in the skies above Europe, flying right alongside airborne refueling tankers that are heading toward the Middle East. This is all happening because the conflict between Israel and Iran continues to get more serious and escalate. Around a dozen Air Force F-35s have been seen in UK airspace flying beside these tanker planes after they quickly moved from the United States toward Europe over the weekend. This is happening after the U.S. Navy also sent aircraft to the Middle East. These missions are supported by one or more tanker planes that either fly along with the fighter jets or launch from overseas bases to provide the fuel that the fighters need to reach their final destination. Large formations of planes are always split into smaller sections, and each section gets a supporting tanker. This happens because the fighter pilots have a really heavy workload, and they need to refuel at specific time intervals so they always have enough fuel to reach the closest runways while they're flying over the ocean. Intermediate stops are also required for what's called a coronet mission to Central Command. These intermediate stops usually happen at Lajes Air Base in the Azores, or at either Rota Air Base or Moron Air Base in Spain. There was a social media post that quickly reached 1 million views by a user called Coronet East, but that post is no longer public. It mentioned 12 F-22 and F-35 fighter jets deploying to the Gulf region in the next 48 hours. This seems to match similar reports that are going around about F-22 Raptors getting ready to leave from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia to deploy to Central Command. Langley is really important because it's home to the 1st Fighter Wing and 100 Seaman Bay 2nd Fighter Wing, which oversee the operations of 3 different F-22 squadrons. Aviation enthusiasts, these are people who are really interested in airplanes and love tracking them, claim that both F-35 Lightning jets and F-22 Raptors are part of this operation. They're monitoring their movements through live radar tracking services, which is pretty cool technology that lets regular people see where military planes are flying. Several refueling tanker planes are reported to have now reached European military bases. These include Rammstein Air Base in Germany, plus Moron Air Base and Rota in Spain. There have also been additional landings at Aviano Air Base in Italy, Prestwick International Airport in the UK, and Souda Bay in Greece. When it comes to the F-35 reports, different sources mention either the Vermont Air National Guard or the 48th Fighter Wing at RAF Lakenheath in the UK. RAF Lakenheath is special because it has the only US F-35s that are permanently stationed in Europe. It would make sense to choose Lakenheath's F-35s because they would quickly arrive in the Central Command area of operations and be available for whatever missions they might need to do. Just as news outlets were about to publish articles about this, Coronet East wrote on social media that F-35s had departed from RAF Lakenheath, supported by KC-135 tanker planes from RAF Mildenhall and other air bases. There are also additional rumors that F-16 fighter jets from Aviano Air Base in Italy might also be called in to deploy to Central Command. However, this might be a deployment that was planned in advance because earlier in the month, reports mentioned that Aviano's 31st Fighter Wing received a deployment notice in the morning on June 17th. Plane spotters and people who listen to aircraft radio frequencies across Europe reported seeing the transit of F-16s from Aviano as well as F-35s from RAF Lakenheath. A friend and reader named Glenn Lockett sent some amazing photos he took in the UK as the F-35s deployed with KC-135 tanker support. The photos that Lockett sent proved that the dozen F-35s are split into 3 flights of 4 jets each. Now let's talk about the tanker relocation, because this is where things get really impressive. During the night between June 15th and 16th, 2025, about 30 U.S. Air Force KC-135 and KC-135 to my pars aerial refueling aircraft left their bases in the United States and headed to Europe. Most of these aircraft landed at Rammstein Air Base in Germany and at air bases in Spain, while 2 landed at Aviano Air Base in Italy, 1 landed at Prestwick International Airport in the UK, and 3 landed at Souda Bay in Greece. The reason for this massive deployment was initially unclear, although people noted that these were repositioning flights, and the tankers weren't bringing fighter jets with them at that time. Later in the day, U.S. officials told Reuters, but they spoke on condition of anonymity, which means they didn't want their names used, that the large number of refueling aircraft deployed to Europe is meant to provide options to President Donald Trump as Middle East tensions could erupt into conflict between Iran and Israel. The latest statement by U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth seems to confirm that the fighter deployment is defensive or meant to deter other countries from starting trouble. However, some comments that Trump made previously hint at possible future involvement, although it's unclear under what conditions that might happen. Trump said something pretty interesting. "We're not involved in it. It's possible we could get involved, but we are not at this moment involved." This suggests that while America isn't directly fighting right now, they're keeping their options open. Additionally, in a mysterious post on social media, the president wrote, "Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign," and added that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He ended with a final message to Iranian citizens stating, "Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran." This whole situation shows how quickly military forces can move around the world when tensions rise. The coordination required to move dozens of aircraft across continents, coordinate refueling, manage airspace, and position forces strategically is absolutely incredible. It's like a massive, complex dance happening in the sky, with each plane playing its part in a much larger strategy. The fact that aviation enthusiasts and regular people can track some of these movements using publicly available flight tracking websites adds an interesting modern twist to military operations. While obviously the military keeps their most sensitive operations secret, the basic movement of aircraft can often be observed by anyone with internet access and the right websites. This deployment represents a significant show of American air power and demonstrates the country's ability to rapidly project force anywhere in the world when needed.